Alright, last time we took a look at the first three Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Now let's move on to the next three, starting with Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Master. After the third film's success, it left no doubt that a fourth film would be soon to follow. For some reason, I was really interested in the fourth film without really knowing what it was going to be like, mainly because the fourth film in a horror franchise tends to be good. I don't know why, but it always seems to happen. The story sees Freddy Krueger return, and he's back to take out the remaining survivors from the previous film, but also a whole new group of teens to kill as well. However, one teen named Alice becomes a true threat to Freddy as she seems to gain new abilities with each one of his kills, and becomes an equal rival to him. I have to admit, while I don't find it as good as the third film, it could have been a hell of a lot worse. Much like the third film, there isn't anything remotely scary about it. Most of the kills and the tone of the film comes off more creepy and sickening than anything else, but in a weird way it works. The kills are simply outrageous. The film really pushes the nightmares into the insane category, but again, it works. We have Freddy literally sucking the life out of a girl, turning a girl into a cockroach and then squashing her. I think what's really interesting is that all of the returning characters' deaths are pretty basic Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, and it's the new kids where they take it to the next level. I think the only problem I have with this film's story is that it does feel like an updated version of the last film. Everything else is very imaginative and clever, while the story feels like more of the same and doesn't feel like it takes the franchise any further than the third film did. Acting-wise, the film is good. Robert Englund once again steals the show. Like the third film, he channels a more comedic Freddy than a scary Freddy, but it works in a way because it contrasts the seriousness of the other characters. Lisa Wilcox also does a good job as the role of Alice. Just the way her character is portrayed is pretty cool. Tuesday Knight replaces Patricia Arquette in the role of Kristen Parker, but doesn't do too bad of a job in the role. The rest of the cast is alright, but it's those three roles that stand out to me. If I had to say anything bad about the characters in this film, it's that they are way too over the top. One of the problems I had with films from this era is that no writer knew how to write a child or teen character. This problem even exists to this day. So overall, the fourth film is pretty good. It has its flaws, but it's easy to see why Dream Master has become a favorite among fans. Obviously, since the fourth film was so successful, another sequel was planned immediately after. However, instead of waiting a couple years to release it, New Line Cinema was quick to put this film into production, and Nightmare on Elm Street 5, A Dream Child, released almost exactly a year after the fourth film. While this might not seem like a problem in today's movie world with franchises like Saw and Paranormal Activity pulling the same routine, this was a much different era of film where box office runs were much longer and films were not so front-loaded when releasing. So by the time A Dream Child released, the fourth film was just barely coming out on VHS, so this was a pretty risky stunt to pull. Ironically, the Halloween franchise would pull the same stunt the exact same year with Halloween 4 and 5. The story pretty much picks up where Nightmare on Elm Street 4 left off, where we see what the character of Alice has been up to. It turns out that Alice is pregnant with her boyfriend Dan's baby, and Freddy is using the baby to get into her friend's dreams. We also see some weird dreams of Freddy's rebirth. The story makes no sense. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't interesting, but this film has no specific direction in terms of plot or pace. The Dream Child element was an interesting idea, but doesn't pay off because it's poorly explained and executed. Freddy's rebirth took me a couple sit-throughs to understand. If I had to say anything good about this film, its style and its tone is pretty cool. The lighting effects, the set designs, and the gothic tone that the film possesses is really nice to look at and gives the film a nice look. This mainly occurs in Alice's dreams. For her dreams, they got really creative. The kills, for the most part, seem a bit lazier this time, except for the motorcycle kill. That was pretty cool. However, the eating nightmare and the comic nightmare, while visually impressive for the time, just seemed like lazy writing and way too rushed. Acting-wise, I can put up really with only Robert Englund and Lisa Wilcox. The rest is just horrible. Robert Englund is still awesome as Krueger, and Wilcox still plays a pretty good rival to him as Alice. However, the rest of the cast is just dreadful and are all very uninteresting. Overall, while the story seemed like an interesting idea, it doesn't really pan out. While I like the style of the movie, the rest just seems very rushed and undeveloped, so this is worth skipping if you're a fan of the franchise. Despite a rather mixed reaction from fans and making only half of what the fourth film made at the box office, another sequel went into the works, but New Line Cinema wanted everyone to believe that this will be the final film in the franchise, giving it the title of Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. The story now sees Freddy attacking kids from a youth center. Freddy eventually leads them to Elm Street, and we learn more about Freddy's past through a new character named Maggie Burroughs. While this film ended up on my top 10 worst horror sequels, I have to admit, it's kind of grown on me over time. I still don't find it to be that great or even the least bit scary, but it's actually quite entertaining. The reason why it ended up on my top 10 worst list was because I thought it looked horrible in both style and story when compared to the rest of the franchise. But after watching it several times more, I started viewing it almost as a spoof. I know it's technically not a spoof, but with all the humor and the more pop culture references, it comes off that way, and I feel that viewing it in that manner makes it a better movie than when I viewed it years ago. Now, that's not to say there aren't any problems. This has got to be the least interesting in terms of style and tone. The tone of the film comes off rather bland, and the set designs are not nearly as creative as they were in the previous sequels. The kills, on the other hand, I have to admit, while not scary or even creepy, are actually very entertaining. The video game death is always my favorite, and this is what I meant by pop culture references. None of the sequels ever took it to this level. Having Freddy kill someone by playing a video game is totally out of the norm, even for Freddy, and because of that, it became one of my favorite kills in the franchise. The hearing aid bit is a little too standard, on the other hand. It's almost as if they came up with this cool idea for the video game, but the ear bit seemed more forced in, almost as if they didn't have any other ideas for it. However, Robert Englund does make the scene cool with his great humor. Acting-wise, this film definitely falls into last in this franchise. I hate to sound like a broken record, but Robert Englund is still the best performance in the film. You can tell that he knew that this script was meant to be more comedic than anything else, so he took Freddy's humor to the next level, and it's really his humor that saves this flick. My favorite moment is the Wicked Witch parody. Everyone considers that moment the jump the shark moment in the franchise, but I laughed my ass off. The only other performance worth mentioning is Lisa Zane as Maggie. She does an okay job. The rest of the cast is just really uninteresting, and the performances are lackluster, which is unfortunate. So overall, Freddy's Dead is a movie that I've grown to kind of like over time. It has some major flaws, but I think if you look at it more as a comedy than a horror film, then you might actually find something to like about it. Well, that's Nightmare on Elm Street 4 through 6. It's interesting to see how the character has evolved from the first picture, both for the good and the bad. However, we're not done. 3 more films await, and we see how this franchise continues to evolve. But, is it for the better? We'll soon find out. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you next time.